Miller. He's a weed scientist at WSU and works down at NREC in Skagit County. Thank you.
No. Oh, you don't know how lucky you are. It was so good for just a second. But now you get to hear me for the next 20 minutes. Good to go. Okay, what I'm going to visit with you about today is some work that I was doing over the last 12 months or so in blueberry. This is money from the Blueberry Commission. The idea was we wanted to look at some different herbicides. But before we get started, any Scots out there, Scottish background? Today, November 30th, happy St. Andrew's Day. How often do I get a chance to wear a plaid tie? I mean, really? I got this in Scotland. This is how I spent my time in Scotland. It was, which one of these is in me? Can you tell? Can you tell? Second from the right. Yeah, thank you so much. The answer is C. I want to visit with you about the herbicide trial. Okay, enough about this St. Andrew's Day, but happy St. Andrew's Day to everyone in the room. We were interested in doing full meal deal, looking at entire programs. We've been doing a lot of work over the last few years to get new registrations in blueberry, and we've got a ton of new products out there, right? Many of you have used a lot of those new products. The question is, how do we do a complete job of weed control from spring through dormancy? So we wanted to evaluate some of these products, looking at them in that way, looking at tank mixtures, looking at different timings of applications. So each of the programs that we were looking at, we looked at 8 different programs that consisted essentially of 3 application timings. The first one was in late dormancy, so it was usually in March this last year, post-bloom. So we looked at early June, right after the bloom had pretty much taken care of things. And then in the fall, we were looking at late September. So those just went out a couple months ago. We haven't really evaluated that fall aspect yet. We'll look at that more in the springtime. We were looking for crop safety primarily because one of the questions we get is, if I put on all these different herbicides, am I buying myself trouble? I know I can control the weeds, but am I slowing down the growth of the plants, or am I causing some other kind of problem? The other thing we were interested in looking at was location-wise. So we had a number of different cultivars, but on both sides of the mountain. So we had, with Craig Ford, 2 different, he had some Dukes and Drapers. These are fairly young plantings, so these are less than 5 years old. We had some older Rika. I don't know when these Rikas were put in, 15 years ago probably. So they were good size, fully established, and they'd been there for a while with Richard Sakuma, with Sakuma Farms. And then with Alan Schreiber, there's Alan. Thank you. We had a couple of fairly new plantings. This was 3rd year plantings of Draper and Elliott. So we kind of ran the gamut as far as age of the plantings, as well as we were trying to get a little bit of different cultivars to see whether we had some cultivar sensitivities. But we also wanted to get an evaluation of east versus west, different soil types, different temperature conditions. All that stuff is going to play a role perhaps in how these herbicides might cause crop injury. So I was glad that we had Draper on both sides, so that gave us a point of contact. Now, let me go through the program. Some of these herbicides may be familiar to you, maybe they won't. And I want to kind of visit with you about that in this section, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this. Allion is a new product, just got registered like a month ago. So we just got it. It's going to be one that we've looked at for a number of years, in blueberry as well as in raspberry. The thing to remember about Allion is that it is very much a pre-emergence product. In fact, it's a pre-germination product. So if you have any herbicide that you'd ever want to apply way early, this is the one. This is the one. It has really good longevity. It lasts a long time in the soil, and it kind of fits our Northwest Washington weeds quite nicely. Central Washington, I'm not sure it's going to get all of the weeds there, but it is going to be also a long-lived product. So you should be able to get some pretty good longevity from it. Trevix is a product we've looked at for a number of years as well. It's very comparable in activity to Goal and AIM herbicide. It has a good burn down potential. BASF is looking at registering it, but I haven't seen that that's happened yet. We were looking for blueberry and for raspberry, and eventually I think we're going to get there. Not much soil activity, so it's almost completely like, think a cane burning kind of product with AIM. It's going to be very similar to that. It'll burn down a lot of the broadleaves, not much grass activity, but it's, you use it together with an allion because of pre-emergence. We wanted to have something to burn down weeds that were already up and growing. Stinger you should be familiar with. Stinger's been around for a while. It's a very specific activity. It works on Asteraceae types of plants. So think dandelion, think sow thistle, think Canada thistle, things like that. Works really well on that. Almost all post-emergence, because the rate we're using doesn't have a lot of soil activity. So we're going to get some soil activity, but it's mostly from foliage. Gramoxone you're very familiar with. Contact herbicide again. Sandia is a product that we've had for, gosh, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years now. It's a sulfonated urea herbicide, and it's a product that we kind of went after primarily for nutsedge control. Post-emergence nutsedge control is kind of its claim to fame. AIM you're familiar with as a cane burner. We've been using it for a number of years. Chateau, very comparable to Goal, very comparable to this Trevix, so keep that one in mind. We combined them in number 2 here. Stinger Gramoxone for the mid-season one, and then Matrix plus AIM rather than Sandia plus AIM. So kind of similar, a little bit different in these programs. Carmex you're very familiar with, Diuron, Sandia, Trevix, Stinger Gramoxone. Callisto is another product that we just got registrations on about 3 years ago. It's a bleaching herbicide. It's kind of its own area as far as the weeds it controls. We do get post-emergence activity with it, but it also has some pre-emergence activity. I think many of you have looked at Callisto over the years, and blueberry is a really nice product, I think. Carmex, Matrix, Trevix instead of Sandia, Stinger Gramoxone, and Callisto and AIM in the late season. Other products that we looked at that I haven't mentioned yet is this Linex or Linuron. Lorox, you might know it as. It's a product that's very comparable to Carmex. Diuron, Linuron are similar. We found over the years that Linex has a bit more activity for the same amount of active ingredient. So we were going on 2 pounds of Carmex. We're looking at 1 pound of Linex. And we used it in the same way that we would a Diuron. And the rest of these are familiar to you. Sinbar, probably everybody in the room is using Sinbar at one time or another. Sandy soils, you want to avoid use of it. Gravelly soils, you want to avoid use of it. Tends to move a bit more than what we like, particularly in wet conditions. But it does have some really good longevity to it, so it's not a bad product to use in established blueberry. Casseron, you should be familiar with. We were using the granular type of Casseron, but there's a liquid also. Dormant season application works pretty well on most of our perennials, but it does have some longevity that potentially could control weeds throughout the summer. This last one that I haven't mentioned yet is Zeus Prime. Zeus is, for you strawberry producers, Spartan is the same as Zeus. Sulfentrazone is the active ingredient. For blueberry and raspberry, it's going to be Zeus. Zeus Prime is a pre-packaged mix of sulfentrazone plus AIM. So it has both the residual of sulfentrazone plus the contact burn that we see with AIM. So it's a prepackaged mix. So I just used it by itself here in the late dormancy. And here's the mid-June application, and here is the September application. So questions on these programs? And that's all the time I have. No, I'm kidding. Weed control. How do we do on weed control? Well, let me kind of preface this. Duke and Draper were fairly new. They were like 5-year-old plants up in Linden here. Draper and Elliott were 3-year-old plants in the Eltopia, Columbia Basin area. So they were both young plantings. We didn't have a lot of weed pressure there. 1 minute. Seriously? No, no, no. That's really 10 minutes. Thank you. Hey, Rocky. So we were looking at a different kind of level of weed control. The Ricas had been there for a long time. We had two weed species that were really kind of major in the plots. Yellow nutsedge being the worst of the two, perennial, nasty plant, very hard to control, and wild buckwheat. Some folks will call this bindweed, but it's not the field bindweed. It's more of it's in the Polygonaceae family, same as in dock and some of these others, and it is an annual, so it's coming from seed every year. So we wanted to get a kind of sense for could we control these two weeds with these programs, and in general, if I look at the weed control in Eltopia, this was Draper with the yellow bars and Elliott is in the white. You can see that, let's face it, weed control was above 80% in early June. We got very, very good weed control there. How about yellow nutsedge? Now this is in the RICA trial. If you take a look at here, this is 50% control over here. 50%. How many say 50% is a really great number, right? It's not so good. Not so good. But you can see that what we started at, percent cover here, this is 20% or 25% cover. So if the plot was 25% covered with yellow nutsedge, that would be the number here. So the bigger the bar, the worse the weed problem. Okay, so this isn't control, this is cover. You can see the difference between July in the orange and October in yellow. That was the amount of increase we saw. Now, you see this NS, that means not statistically different. No significant difference between any of these treatments. None of these worked very well on yellow nutsedge. About the only one that looked like we were maybe getting some level of control was this one. But you can see that we saw quite an increase. 6 here was the Casseron. Casseron had at least a little bit of effect, I think, on the level of yellow nutsedge in there. Statistically, no difference. In other words, there's enough variability in there. We couldn't separate these means, but it looked like this one at least had some level of control. Buckwheat, this is the annual. What we saw here, first of all, you see the difference here in early. July is in green. October is in kind of this burnt umber, right? So you can see that we saw a big increase in cover from July into October. But you also see at this end over here, pretty nice. So we saw some good level of control from that treatment numbers 6, 7, and 8. Out of those, Sinbar is one of those. Sulfentrazone is one of those over here on number 8. And Casseron is one of those. So those three seem to be giving us a bit of control. All of the timings that we did in June or whatever, we didn't really see much difference in July, so I think the difference is the residual component of this. We were able to reduce these. Statistically, no. Statistically, again, we didn't see a difference. But numerically, those are ones I think we maybe want to focus on. Sinbar, Casseron, and sulfentrazone, or the Zeus. How did berry yield do? We did a couple of sites we harvested off. We looked at the RICA and then the Dukes up here in Linden. And you can see the difference here in the kind of the white and the lavender colors represent the yields we got. We basically picked all the fruit off of a meter of row, and so you're just seeing grams per meter, but it doesn't really matter what that means. We're just looking at differences between the plots, and we did not see a statistical difference. So none of these herbicides really hurt matters much. With the Duke, almost no weeds, so it was all based on crop injury, potential crop injury, no potential crop injury from the early and the mid-season applications. With the RICA, because they were older plots, we didn't really expect to see any differences as far as yield was concerned, and sure enough, we did not. In fact, they all kind of fall in the same boat. Looking at fruit size, same story, same story. The Dukes were a little bit larger than Ricas, but that's about the only difference we saw there. No statistical difference in between the programs, okay? Now, what are we going to do next year, 2018? My plan is to continue this sequential herbicide application program. We did do the applications in September. I'm going to go back to these plots over the winter time and measure amount of growth we had on these shoot extension from this summer, and that'll give us an idea whether we slowed anything down. Otherwise, I'm thinking we're not going to see a lot of difference until springtime. I am very interested to see whether any of that the 3 different applications, whether we knocked bloom or delayed bloom or did something like that, particularly from our fall applications. So I don't anticipate seeing that, but having the different sides of the mountains, east-west, would be a good thing to do. So we're going to continue this program through next year. Hopefully we'll get funded from the Blueberry Commission again this next year, and we'll continue with these same plots, and hopefully be able to get a full evaluation of how well these programs work. I think, yeah, welcome back to Scotland. What do you think? Me in a kilt? Yeah, right, yeah. Take a look at this is beautiful. I spent 5 months there. It was really exciting. So I'm not naked, and that's none of your business. Beautiful country. If you haven't been, you got to go. And happy St. Andrew's Day again. Questions? Anybody have questions on? I left some time in here, so if you have questions about the herbicides or other herbicide programs, now's the time. Oh, you got a dead phone. Sorry. He likes that UW purple anyway.
You on? Yeah. On your Trevex, how does it compare to goal and aim? You know, like, see, I'm a little bit scared of using goal. I'd rather use aim. It's a little bit more gentle. So where does Trevex fit in?
If you look at all of those chemistries, those PPO inhibitors is the mode of action, essentially are contact burn down type of products. Goal has some soil activity. The Zeus will have some soil activity. Chateau will have soil activity. They change a little bit in their amount of burn. Goal is fairly comparable to Chateau in the level of burn we see from those. With the Zeus, less burn, so it's a little softer product. The highest burn we get is with AIM and with this Trevex. Saflufenicil is one of those that has a lot of burn associated with it. In fact, that's one we were looking at as a cane burner primarily. Not much residual, so in that way it's going to be a lot like AIM. We're not going to see the residual hold back like primocanes, but you also don't see residual control in blueberries. So think of it as being comparable to an AIM type product. Yeah, I would even say it's going to last as long as Goal or Zeus or Chateau. They'll have longer residuals, no question. Other questions on any of these products or other products? Wow. Come on, really? You're going to let me off this easy? What, I got 2 minutes. Yeah. I'll give Alan my time, yes.
This doesn't have anything to do with your talk, but have you worked on some post-emergent applications for bindweed or morning glory family or berries?
For the morning glory or true bindweed, what I call true bindweed, the convolvulus or calistegia. I had a little talk over here this morning about that, and one of the things that, because it's a perennial, it's going to have a different application aspects than about this buckwheat. One of the things we know for sure is that Casseron is going to help us with that. So dormant season applications of Casseron will help with bindweed control. The other products that we have are mostly pre-emergence germination products, and so they're not going to help us very much with controlling the bindweed. We get just a little bit of bang for the buck with a stinger and blueberry, but it's not going to help us that much. So I think you have to kind of rely on Casseron as the best thing going. Some of those sulfonylureas will also have a bit of activity. It's not what I'd call control, but it's suppression. So potentially some of that summer aspect with Matrix or with Sanvia will help a little bit, but it would only be suppression at best. So think about dormant seasons with Casseron, follow it up maybe with one of those SU products, or even a burn down product will help to defoliate it. So the things like Gold, like AIM, like those types, even Gramoxone, burn those things off, and then the regrowth, you'll just have to kind of deal with it later on. Other questions? Are we out of time? Saved by the bell. Thank you very much.